So before let's go into a little bit definition of microservices architecture. What is microservices architecture? To understand microservices architecture, we have to understand monolithic architecture. All of us, we can relate to it. A couple of years back, we wrote applications. We created one Visual Studio solution, and we dumped all the code inside that solution, whether it belonged to different domains like order, sales, inventory. Everything was a big project. So let me give you a little bit before we go further. My name is Vikas Kearney. I have more than 20 years of experience in IT industry. I am architect. I'm TOGAF certified architect. So a couple of years back, that was a good practice. You create one Visual Studio solution and dump all the code. It looked very easy, but over the time, you could see that it became very, very difficult, and especially for companies like Facebook or Uber. Initially, what they did, they built all their core functionality in one solution, and they had one centralized database. So the problem with monolithic application is if I make changes to order, I have to deploy whole thing, sales, inventory, everything to the production, and update the databases also. And if something goes wrong, first thing, all my support staff will be on the call. And if something went wrong in other areas, I have to roll back. So that was a big problem, a lot of cost. And with cloud computing, that is not the right solution. A lot of time, like some part of your web application is under a lot of stress. For example, if you are using catalog, you have an e-commerce application, you are using catalog. The catalog page will have a lot of traffic. A lot of people will be browsing what are the products, what they can buy, whereas very few people will be placing order. So the catalog page, you have to put it on a server which you can scale up. So for that, you need some more flexible architecture. So monolithic architecture did not give you that kind of functionality. Before go to Before we go to monolithic architecture, there's a SOA architecture, service-oriented architecture. In service-oriented architecture, applications was working with other services through a service bus, and it was better. But here again, the problem was the chances were you have to upgrade all the components, whole thing together, and it was kind of a monolithic architecture, better than monolithic. So here comes the microservices architecture. In microservices architecture, you define small independent applications. They which have their own databases. Order has its own database, sales has its own database, inventory has its own database. So the advantage of this architecture is order. If you have to make some changes to the order, you can just move this component to the production without worrying about the sales inventory. That way you don't have to get all the staff members for the production move. You can just get the order team on call for that day. And another advantage was, as I discussed about the microservices architecture, was as some of the components may be underused, heavy use. For example, I gave a catalog example. Catalog page, people maybe a lot of people may be using, whereas very few people may be placing orders. So if we catalog microservice was different, order microservices can different. So you can deploy them independently and you can scale them independently. So that way it will save you cost. You don't have to unnecessarily scale some applications which nobody is accessing. And another advantage was order can in monolithic application, generally you made sure every all the applicable code is in C sharp, Java or Python. In microservice architecture, order microservices, you can use Python, sales services can be C sharp, inventory can be Java, and all they talk through REST API, HTTP protocol. So you could build, you could have a multilingual teams. So as we discussed, what are the microservices? Microservices are independent units which can be deployed independent of other units. The benefits: scalability, I discussed scalability, resiliency. If one part is down, it doesn't bring the other parts down. If catalog was down, it doesn't make sure microservices architecture make sure that order is not down. And independent deployment, you can do independent deployment. As compared monolithic, you have to deploy everything or nothing. So there are challenges when you are working with microservices, data management. Now you have data in multiple databases. You need to synchronize the databases. There's a lot of inter-service communication, and it adds complexity. So these are the companies which are using Netflix, Amazon, Uber, and Shopify microservices architecture. So this is a very nice diagram I got, which tells you what is the difference between service-oriented architecture, monolithic microservices. Service-oriented architecture composed of reusable services that communicate via standardized protocols. Monolithic is single application with everything inside it. Microservices is independent, loosely coupled services focusing on specific functionality. Granularity, coarse-grained services grouped by business functionality. Here, everything has one thing. It's again fine-grained, single responsibility services. Scalability, moderate scalable, um, but often replies on ECB. ECB as Enterprise Service Bus. So that was the biggest rollback, inter-service bus. All these services are calling inter-service bus. That can create some bottleneck. Monolithic, either in the application you have to scale or nothing. As we discussed, microservices, you can highly scalable because they are small independent unit. So you can, whatever the functionality is being called, a lot of users, you can scale it. Communication, SOA used REST, ESP. Monolithic is everything in same application. There is no communication. As I discussed, microservices uses REST, gRPC. Also, it uses event-driven architecture. Databases is interesting that it can be centralized or shared databases, monolithic single microservices. In ideal microservice, every microservice should have its own database. Deployment, already we discussed. Technology stack, we know that's here comes. It's SOAP, REST, Visual, ESP. SOA gives you a little bit diverse tech stack. Monolith, everything has to be in .NET or Java, whereas in microservices, you can have a combination of technologies. Fault tolerance. So because of ESP dependency, the fault tolerance was less. Before I go to maintenance, that's interesting. SOA is easier than monolithic, but harder than microservices. Application is very hard to maintain because one, as I discussed, you make changes to the order. It can affect inventory, other parts. Whereas microservices, uh, like easy to maintain or evolve. Fault tolerance. As microservices, we can see, told they are independent applications. If order is down, so sorry, let's say if sales application is down, but orders still can be processed. Catalog is down, order can still be processed. Inter-service communication, SOA used SOAP REST asynchronous. Monolithic is internal function calls, and as we discussed earlier, we use REST, gRPC, or event-driven. Development complexity. Monolithic is very interesting. Low complexity initially, but becomes harder to scale and maintain. I remember like one of the monolithic applications, we use some framework and those framework became obsolete. But we were struck with those framework because we have to change everything or nothing. If we were using microservices, you could update one microservice as one time. So that's another advantage. So it's giving examples where the use cases are being used. Monolithic, mostly legacy application, and microservices, basically cloud microservices architecture is highly recommended for cloud development. Any questions so far? SOA versus monolithic versus microservices.
I, hey, because
Yes.
just for my understanding, you are saying like each each functionality means like catalog or payment. Uh, they all are the separate microservices, and they are going to use separate database. So my question for you: how do we integrate? Means like that one services to another service.
So like I didn't use the diagram here, like order.
Okay.
Generally, what
Yeah.
order doesn't call the database directly. It calls the sales microservices. I'll come to that a little bit later.
Okay. Okay.
We'll be
Okay.
talking
Go ahead.
more workflows, how we discuss workflow, microservices. So what happens is like in what we do is we create most in our projects, what we do is create a order CRUD microservices and order workflow. And order workflow can call all other microservices. So all the communication will be through microservices, not through direct database. Make sense, Sanjeev?
Yes, because
So you have to write orchestrator, synchronization code, kind of. So any other question before we further move? It tells you, right? It tells you why microservices are so popular in cloud computing.